Hi folks, welcome back to We the People. I'm Dave Gallus, your host. Today it's going to be a fun show for me because I'm going to be reminiscing over an event, an adventure I had in my life. When I was 62 back in 2013, and even before that, I started formulating my mind. I wanted a great adventure. Once I retired from the police department, then the post office, and before I settled down into a rocking chair, if that ever happens, which I hope it doesn't, I wanted to do something, a great adventure. Now, I'd always been in, on, or underwater. I was a police diver for 15 years. I grew up on the Delaware River with my family. So it was natural that I wanted to get into boating, but in this case, sailing. And I got the bug to sail by communicating with an old-time sailor. And he told me about Joshua Slocum. And Joshua Slocum was the first circumnavigator, went around the world by himself in a very small boat, a 30-foot boat. And I thought, holy smoke. And this was 1900. Now, this was sail. There was no power in his boat. It was all sail. And he sailed around the world. The book is fantastic. I think it's Around the World Alone, I think it's called, by Joshua Slocum. I would highly recommend the read. But I warn you, because once you read that book, if you have any affinity to the water, you're going to want to do the same thing that I did. So I thought, I was 62 at the time, and I thought, I want to be young enough to climb the mast and not be too old to handle a boat by myself. So my producer will bring up the first picture, and this is where I'm at the dock. Now you'll see the two boats that I have. And the boat that you see on the right is the boat that I kind of cut my teeth on. That was a 24-foot sloop. And a sloop is a single-masted boat with a foresail and a mainsail. The boat on the left is what I did my 5,000-mile adventure on. That was named Stu. The first boat I named Patronus, and the second boat I named Stu. And people ask me, they'll say, well, why did you name your sailboats after men? Usually they're named after women because they cost a lot and they're beautiful. But I picked it for the sailboats, the male names, because I wanted a strong protective name. And if you think of a sailboat, the phallic symbol of a keel entering the water, the sea, is usually a woman, so I had that kind of idea. So anyway, so Stu, the boat on the left, is what I left dock on. And I left the dock on October 4th, 2013. My intention was to sail down to South America or beyond. I got as far as the Dominican Republic, which is pretty close to South America. After Dominican Republic and Haiti, then you go to Puerto Rico, down through the Virgin Islands into South America. But I got as far as the Dominican Republic. So just to give you an idea of what it's like on the water, the next slide you'll see is just a sunset, and it's typical of what you'd see on deck. You're sitting there with a cup of coffee or a beer. In my case, I didn't have refrigeration, or maybe a shot of whiskey or something like that, and just really just taking in the beautiful scenery and nothing but you and water and God. So the next slide you'll see is when I'm at sea, and this is a sunset. So these are the typical visions you'd see, and it was so beautiful. I mean, imagine waking up, and sometimes I'd wake up at 2 in the morning on my journey, and I'd be anchored up, and it'd be pitch black, but the stars would be beautiful, and you could almost touch them. The sky was crystal clear. You might hear some sounds around you in the water. You didn't know what they were. You have a cup of coffee, and then you watch the sun come up, or at nighttime you'd watch it go down like this slide. So I left Philadelphia in the Camden. There's a dock in Camden, right across from Philadelphia. I headed down the Intercoastal Waterway. I would go in protected waters all the way down through the Carolinas, Georgia. I think there was one canal. It was called the Dismal Swamp, but it wasn't dismal. It was all beautiful. It really was. And as I went into, I do want to show you some locks that I went through. Now, this is New Orleans. I went down the East Coast, but these locks, it's amazing. The locks, if people don't understand, is where you have different water levels that you have to compensate for. So a boat may come in the lock in the high water, and then it's closed off by these doors that you see. And then the water is then drained out. It's closed off at the top. It's drained out at the bottom. Now the water is at a lower level. So these locks were very interesting. And the next couple slides you'll see, too, is the locks as well. You're inside a lock now. You're inside a confined area, and the water will either be drained out or increased in volume, so you can go to a higher position. And you'll see the next lock is when I'm leaving. So this was typical of the intercoastal waterway. Now, the next slide you'll see is one of my favorite spots. Oh, now this is around the Gulf. I mixed up here. Sorry, thank you, producer. This is the intercoastal waterway, but it's around the Gulf. So you'll see horses in the intercoastal waterway, and there's also cattle on the next slide. They're down. Now this is salt water. This is brackish water, and yet they're drinking the water. So I guess their bodies have been accustomed to it. So the next slide will be Tarpon Springs. It should be Tarpon Springs if I got the order right. And that is one of my favorite spots. Now, me being a diver, Tarpon Springs is one of the foremost diving centers of the world, well, on the East Coast, I'll say. And in antiquity, they would use hard hat diving suits. The Greeks actually, and there's still a tremendous amount of Greeks in Tarpon Springs. And I met quite a few of them. They still use the hard hat occasionally. I think it's for show. I had to train in the hard hat. So when I was becoming a police diver in Philadelphia. So I know how difficult that outfit is to wear and how challenging it is. I have a lot of respect for the men that put that on every day. But so I'm going down the East Coast and I get to Florida, and as you're moving down through the Chesapeake Bay, the intercoastal waterway, the water's changing, the colors of the waters are changing. When you get to Florida, you're getting into tropical waters where it's blue water. So you'll see the next one. The next slide will give you an idea of what the colors I'm seeing now as I'm heading down to and in Florida. And this is a picture of my dinghy. Now, one thing I did since I was on the boat by myself, I named every piece of equipment. Because if something goes wrong, I can blame the crew. And I always blame the crew. And this is cannoli. Now, that's an inflatable. And when it's rolled up to me, it reminded me of a cannoli. So I named him Cannoli. I named my anchors Heavy for the big anchor that I had, and Rusty for one that was rusty. So any mishaps on the boat, I'd always blame the crew. They never talked back either. But so during my sailing trip, and you know, it's funny because sailing is a lot of work. You have to change sails, you have to reduce sails in heavy winds, you have to increase sails, you have to spread your, it's called spreading your wings, wing a wing, where you have the jib out on one side and you have the mainsail out on the other to catch as much wind as you can behind you. So it's a lot of work. But a lot of the times I was motoring as well. I had a single-cylinder diesel engine that moved at a neck-breaking speed of 4 knots. So 5,000 miles took 9 months to travel. And I was usually on the move. Only rarely did I stop and carouse or meet people or whatever. It was usually island hopping, making crossings from Florida to the Bahamas, from the Bahamas to the Turks and Caicos Islands, from the Turks and Caicos Islands. That was a big jump. That was 80 miles in open water to Dominican Republic, Luperon, Dominican Republic. So the next slide you'll see is when you're sailing. You're truly sailing, and your sails they're called full and by. And that means your sails are full, you're heeled over, and it's a good day. And this is typical on a nice day, and down in the Bahamas, that's my favorite spot. I can't wait to get back there. Only this time, I don't want to do it on a sailboat because it's too much work. This time, I want to do it on a trawler, which is more like a houseboat, but it's built for sea. So while I was sailing, sometimes I'd have my motor running, I'd have my sails full and by, I'm moving, and I'd have a fishing line over the back. Well, one of the fish I caught will be the next slide. It's a small amberjack, very tasty. But there was another fish that I caught too. It was a barracuda, a big barracuda. And as I'm trying to reel this barracuda in, he's coming closer and closer. I have to watch the coral reefs because coral reefs are very interesting. You can see them at a distance, but what you see is a black ink spot on the water. And you know that that's shallow water, so you got to steer. So I'm steering away from the coral reefs. My engine I got to keep running. I'm using the tiller to steer, and I got a fishing pole at the same time. So when I got the barracuda up close where I could gaff him and bring him on board, I couldn't get to anything except I just had to cut the line because he eventually got wrapped around my rudder. So anyway, the first big stop-off after you come out of Florida and you cross from the lower Miami area over through No Name Harbor, I think it is, you harbor up, and when you get the courage up to cross over the 40 miles in open ocean, you do it at nighttime. And that's a little scary too. You got to watch traffic, but you also have to watch wave action, winds, things like that. But if you do it, you want to time it to where you're coming to your landfall as the sun's coming up, so you can actually read the water. You can see where the coral reefs are. So that first nighttime crossing was a little scary, but I ended up over in the Bahamas. And let's see, so you start down the Bahamas. That was a rough night. I mean, I went over with other couples, and since this was my first time crossing, they wanted to make sure I'd be safe. Well, when we got across, since I don't have an autopilot, I had to stay at the tiller all the time. I was like 8 hours steady going in the nighttime and really tired. And you also have to watch the Gulf Stream, because that'll move you north. So you have to readjust your position and allow for that drift that you're going to have going north. Anyway, we get into the Bahamas, and it was rough. And I told the folks in the other boats, I radioed them, I says, look, I'm going to spend the night here. And they said, you don't want to spend the night on the bank, on the Bahama bank. It's shallow water, and the wind was coming up, and it got rough. And I said, no, I'll be okay, because I was falling asleep at the tiller. I told them, I said, you go ahead, because the next stop was Nassau. They would go down to Nassau, and they would clear in, which means you have to notify the authorities that you're coming into their foreign country. You have to declare your boat. You have to declare firearms if you have them, and I had a shotgun. Anyway, I told them, I said, you guys go ahead. And they said, no, we're not going to leave anybody out on the bank, not on their first night, no. So everybody anchored up. Well, it was so rough that night. When I would go up on the deck to make sure that my anchor was holding and not slipping, the front of the boat would dip down into the water, and I'd be up to my knees in water. So the whole boat would be dipping in. So I had kind of strapped myself into a bunk. The boat's going up and down, dipping like this, sideways, and actually raising out of the water like this. I didn't get seasick that night, and I was very surprised, but a couple of the other folks got seasick that never got seasick before, and the one person lost their anchor. It broke loose, so they had to re-anchor up in the night. I don't think they were happy with me, and I said, well, I didn't want you to guys hang around. I did fine. They didn't. So anyway, the next stop after that night was going into Nassau, and like I said, you have to clear in. That's what it's called. You pay so much money, I think it's like $30 depending on the size of your boat. Show them your firearms, how many cartridges you have. I had, I think, eight shotgun shells, 00 buck, and I had to show them, because when you come back in, they want to make sure that you still have the same number of shells, or where did you use them, where did you discharge them. So anyway, the next slide is in Nassau. Now that was beautiful, Nassau. This here is a picture of Paradise Island, and then there's a canal, and then you have Nassau, which is the small, well, it's a big city on this gigantic island, New Providence Island. Now that picture you're seeing it's a race that they have. It's an annual race that they have and the keel on these sailboats is tremendous, but you can see how much sail is up. You got to have a heavy keel to keep that boat from tipping over. And the Bahamians do this race, I think it's every year. And it was just beautiful to see these boats and the number of men. And they'll have a board that will go all the way out the side, and they'll be all the way out the side of that boat to compensate for the wind pressure on the sails. So it's beautiful to see. So Nassau was beautiful. But I had one experience in this channel right here. I was anchored up where you would think I would be with the camera. And I was in town the one night. Now, when you're anchoring up and there's a bunch of anchored boats around you, you want to make sure that you give plenty of room all around you, because your boat's going to swing with the tide and the wind during the night or any time. Well, and especially if you have different types of anchor rode. An anchor rode is the anchor line, the chain, and the anchor itself. That's all your ground tackle, they call it. So I had like 30 feet of chain, and then I had 300 feet of nylon line. So I was all set up for the night. I didn't expect any trouble. So I go into town. When I come back in from town, there's a Canadian boat, a big a catamaran Canadian boat, steel boat, that's parked very close to me. And I tried to get the people's attention, but they weren't on the boat. So I waited and waited and waited, and I thought, I don't want to move my anchor, because then I'm going to move in close to somebody else. Well, it was about, I went to bed finally. The folks never showed up, and I thought, well, I hope everything's okay. I don't think it's going to get windy. I wake up at about 4 in the morning with this tremendous wind. It's screaming outside. I don't know if you ever heard heavy wind with a metal wire rigging running through. It sounds like the banshees are screaming. Anyway, this wind is really cutting. So I went up on deck to make sure my anchor was holding, because if it slips, I'm in big trouble. I'm going to crash onto the shore. So after this, I start checking my anchor, and here the guy in front of me is actually checking his anchor too, but I can't talk to him. It's too windy. The wind is screaming. So we kind of wave at each other. He's still very close to me now, and I don't know how it's going to go, so I go back to bed. I'm going to take a short break, and it's a pretty exciting experience I have here, and I thought I was going to lose the boat. But I'll be back in a minute after our commercials.
If your loved one has passed away due to COVID-19, pay close attention to this message. You could be entitled to a death benefit of over $300,000. The U.S. government has set up a fund to pay families relief if they've lost a loved one due to COVID-19. The compensation includes a death benefit and lost wages benefit. Time is limited, so we urge you to make a free phone call right now. There's no cost to you for this claim. That's 866-372-3669.
Hi, I'm Ray Bamberg with Here on Earth. I would like to invite you for a free hearing evaluation to our office. We've been here in southern New Mexico for 34 years helping people hear better.
Taking a trip in the next 12 months? Airlines are under tremendous pressure and they're practically giving away their unsold seats. Like every crisis, this one will end too. But right now is the best time to take advantage of giveaway ticket prices on their unsold seats. We're not allowed to publish these low fares online. The only way to get these rock bottom giveaway prices is to call. So phone low-cost airlines now for airline ticket prices you may never see again.
When the school board mismanages its financial fiduciary obligations, does not respect the will of the community, and pursues misguided policies not reflective of the community, we lose our trust and our parents deserve more. School board members are accountable for the regulations and policies they pursue. As these regulations and policies are debated, full transparency must occur in the deliberations with parents and the community. Trust is earned when the school board demonstrates its adherence to the will of the community. Join me in restoring accountability and transparency. I'm Eloy Francisco Macha, School Board District 3.
Paid for by Macha for House BS.
Hi folks, welcome back to We the People. I'm Dave Gallus, your host, and we're talking about my 5,000-mile sea journey from Philadelphia to the Dominican Republic to Corpus Christi, Texas. So I was telling you about being anchored up in now I was told it was 70-mile-an-hour winds in the channel between Nassau and Paradise Island. I'm anchored up, and there's a Canadian boat that's very close to me that's anchored up way too close. He had all anchor chains, so he's going to swing different with the wind and the tide than I would, so this guy wasn't using his head. But I couldn't do anything about it. We're now in a 70-mile-an-hour gale, and we're checking our anchor line. So I thought, I just said a prayer, went back down, my anchor was holding. No more than a minute later, I'm still awake, I feel this tremendous bang, something crashed into me. I go on deck, here's that boat is now on top of me, and he starts his engine up. When he starts his engine up, he cuts my anchor line. Now I'm set adrift in 70-mile-an-hour wind, and I'm heading for the rocks. I'm heading for the marina with other boats. It's like, oh, geez. I had to quick run down, start my engine, and I just barely had enough time to peel away from this boat, this little boat who lost his anchor, and he's sliding by me, heading for the marina. So I'm getting blown out now towards the rock piles, and I'm trying to move out of this channel to get out into open water so I won't run aground or anything. My engine quits. It's like, oh no. It's like, what do I do now? Now I know that sound because my engine doesn't have much torque, so it doesn't, if it gets something wrapped around the prop, it usually slows the engine down and stops it. Well, I look behind me, sure enough, my dinghy, which is an inflatable dinghy, and I've heard that dinghies in high winds will pinwheel. Well, obviously, cannoli pinwheel, that's the dinghy, it flipped around, it's now sitting upside down, the outboard motor foot is sticking up like this, and the line is going from the dinghy up under my boat. That's what's wrapped around my prop. Wow. I got no engine. I can't put the sails up. They'd be torn to shreds as I'm trying to get them up. I'm dragging the dinghy, and so I'm heading towards the rocks. I got no choice. I have to jump. I pull the dinghy in close. I jump on the dinghy, then jump under the boat. I'm holding on to the anchor, not the anchor, but the ladder. And I go under the boat, and I'm saying, this is it. I'm dying, and the boat's going to sink. I managed to get the prop untied, jump back on the dinghy, back on the boat, started the engine, and just had enough time before I hit the rock piles it was pushing me towards. It's like, it was a miracle. It's like, I don't believe this happened. I would have loved to seen a picture of this, but I was a little busy at the time. So I finally get out into open water, and the storm was gone in 20 minutes. So I'm shaking. So I head back, after getting a shot of bourbon to calm down, I head back to where the anchorage was, because now I lost my anchor, and I want to get to that boat before he takes off for what he did. So as I'm coming back into the anchorage, my friend, he's in his dinghy. He's flying out to me. He said, Dave, are you all right? Are you okay? I said, yeah. I said, I'm okay, Joe. I said, but I got to get to that Canadian boat before he takes off. I said, I got a lot of damage here. My bowsprit was bent in. I lost my anchor. The side of the boat was beat up. You know, the fiberglass was beat up. So I get my boat anchored. I get over in the dinghy. I come up to the Canadian boat. Well, when the woman, one of the couple, comes out of the cabin and sees me, she ducks back in the cabin. Her husband came out. I said, look, I said, everybody makes mistakes. I said, but I just want to know that you're going to make good on the damage that was done to my boat. And the guy said, yeah, no problem. So he gave me his insurance information. I thought, oh, okay, at least I have that. And then I'm thinking, Canadian, this is going to be fun. So he gives me the information. I call up this number that he gives me, and they're talking French. Canadian. I said, no parle français. Anglais. Finally, they get somebody on the phone that could talk English. And I said, okay, this is what happened. They said, all right, this is not his auto or his boat insurance. This is his auto insurance. I thought, oh, geez. Is this guy playing me? So I thought, okay. So they said, but wait a minute. We think we can get his boat insurance company for you. And they were so nice about that, and they did do that. So I call them up, and I'm thinking, this is never going to work. I'm never going to get repair. I'm not going to get paid for the repairs that I'm going to have to do. But I thought, okay. I said another prayer. And these people said, itemize everything, make sure you get prices, give us a story of what happened. Well, I got all the prices for repairing the stainless steel bow railing, the cost of the anchor, which I knew where the anchor was. I dove, it was only 20 feet. I dove on it and got the anchor back and had to splice the line again. But the side damage that was done on the boat, which I repaired myself, but I got an estimate for the repairs. And I tell you, it was amazing. 2 weeks after I sent that in, I worded it well too. I said, all this damage was done. I was lucky to survive. I said, except for a few bumps and bruises, I think I'm okay. I don't have any ailments yet. And I'm letting that hang there. So I'm thinking, look, just make good on the repairs. That's all. I'm okay. 2 weeks later, I had the check for the money. It was unbelievable. So that was probably, it was almost my most carrying experience. I'll tell you about the other one later on. So the next slide I'm going to show you was when I was leaving Nassau. Everything was calm now. I'm going to start heading down the lower Bahama Islands. I was in the upper Bahamas. Now I'm going to head down the lower Bahamas. The next one was this slide is where Gilligan's Island was filmed. This, I think it's called Sandy Cay. Yes, Sandy Cay, just south of Nassau. And I went on this island. It was so neat because you could see there were buildings there. There were foundations of buildings there. And I was told that that's where they filmed a lot of Gilligan's Islands. For you old-timers that remember Gilligan's Island, this is where Mary Ann and Ginger and the millionaires were, the skipper and Gilligan. So that was kind of reminiscent. It was a real nice anchorage, too. I really enjoyed that. So I'm heading down the Bahamas from there. And this is a typical day at sea. You know, I rode in on my dinghy and took a picture of my boat for reminiscent. I don't have the boat anymore, and I think about Stu a lot. It was a good home for a long time. And like I said, I was never sick. I tell you, in Nassau, they don't have water. They don't have a well. It's an island. It's a coral island, and New Providence. So what they have to do is they have to use reverse osmosis. So my typical day when I wanted to fill my water jugs was take my water jugs into this gas station. You dinghy into a dock, go into the gas station, and they got this greasy garden hose that you fill your water up with. And you could taste the salt in it. It was brackish water. But again, I never got sick. Your body can probably adjust to various types of water, and it did there. And it was salty, but it was fine, reverse osmosis water. And that's one thing we could use out here in the desert. They can do it in Nassau. They can do it in Israel. We should be able to do it here. So that'll be for another show, because I've talked to people that know that there's a saltwater aquifer underneath the Rio Grande riverbed. So we'll work on that. Time is getting short here, folks, so this is going to have to be a two-part series. But I would suggest that you come back next week to see part 2 of my 5,000-mile sea voyage, because there's one other time when I thought I was going to lose the boat. Now here's a picture in one of my favorite spots. This is nurse sharks. We're not going to get to all the pictures today, but these are nurse sharks that when I pulled into my favorite spot, and I'll tell you about Rum Cay next week. It was a beautiful place. It was beautiful people, and they were all black people. I mean, I was a cop in North Philadelphia, and I was used to rubbing shoulders with some pretty rough characters, and they were all black in the ghetto. Let me see the next slide, because I think this is a picture of the fellows that I hung out with in Rum Cay. Now, the two guys on the outside are both Russians. They're both named Jersey. They're both first name Jersey. Jersey, Little Jersey and Big Jersey. In the middle, it's Marco, who is a very gracious host, and James, the young man in the back there. I spent a lot of time with them. So I'm going to continue this story, and I'm going to tell you all about Rum Cay. This is a book that was written by the lady that Dolores Williams, who is like the senior lady of Rum Cay. It's a very interesting story. I'll tell you all about the folks I met, tell you about when I almost lost my boat again, and other harrowing experiences next week when you see part 2 of my 5,000-mile sea voyage. See you next week, folks.